there was a few small kind of bodies of work that I kind of progressed through, but I ultimately wanted to take the language of the installations, the kind of responding to a space and a physicality, but how to put that into like a singular object.
Got it.
And so that was my kind of driving motivation for a while. And there was there was like a series of drawings that I did where I was stretching canvas and then just covering it, stretching it, gessoing it like you would a painting, and then covering it with graphite, just scribbling on it repeatedly until it becomes this like almost just dense sheet of graphite.
Yeah.
And then and with those they would take on the impression from the process of drawing them. They take on the impression of the structure under it.
Right.
And it was this weird kind of, it was very, very short-lived, but this like kind of what I thought was like I was making like the closest thing to like a representational painting or drawing that I'd done in who knows how long.
Right.
And then those I slowly, I don't remember what even first led me to doing this, but with those I just like I would unstaple them in a couple spots off the frame and then just kind of subtly just kind of crumple parts of it and then reattach it.
Yeah, I mean it's a really beautiful work because I mean there's a lot of stuff going on. There's like the luminosity of the graphite.
Yeah.
And then there's like where you've kind of caused this relief by applying the pressure over the stretchers, and I think it's you were probably inclined to unstaple and move it so that you could actually kind of accentuate how that stretched canvas it kind of maintains its shape. But that's really interesting, and it's really interesting that looking at your this page of your work, how we see like the sculptural elements of what you're working on now, but devoid of the color.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's some point in this timeline where you really got the color bug.
Yeah, it's weird. So again, this is going back to grad school when I was doing the installation work and went back to drawing, and I got rid of color. I didn't know really how to use it, how to incorporate it with that work, and it seemed unnecessary and wasn't an interest to me. And so I was firmly dedicated to works that were just black and white or in grayscale for a very long time, and then I started, once I more fully was committed to like feeling okay with making paintings, ish, I guess, that I was decided I needed to start playing with color again, which I'm still in the midst of working with color pretty heavily in my work. I think though part of the thing that allowed me to start thinking about color again was the grid became my the subject matter of my paintings. And I started using the grid because I knew I wanted to make these works. I didn't want to have to decide on the subject matter for each painting, and so I was like, a grid. Like it's a universally recognizable thing. Everyone knows it when they see it. So I thought it has like an engagement with the viewer without me having to kind of work with anything that's overtly specific or descriptive in terms of content. And so once I had that constant, obviously I changed, the size of the format of it or whatever. But once I had that constant thing, then I was like, well, I guess I need something to explore. So then I add color back into the work and start playing with color a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting is, in our current environment, the arts world, we get a lot of views on Instagram, right? And so people see lots of work online. And, I think what's, fortuitous about, your use of the grid is that it really helps communicate the dimensionality of your work, right? Because, people know logically what's going on with the grid, and they can tell right away that you're doing something sculptural based on what's happening to the grid in your piece.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It becomes like a topographical map or something, and that's something I'm always, and I was interested on when I first started doing this work, and still am now, is that again, because of that familiarity of it, and then because usually I'm crumpling it up, though that's becoming a thing that I'm not doing sometimes now with some of the works, but that the work, again, it has this something has gone awry, and I'm very interested in that, and the works to often have this thing is kind of falling apart, or it's collapsed on itself, and and the geometric subject matter, of course, lends itself to that, and and then obviously in the work, especially from where I started, I've gotten more fussy about trying to make the work as mechanical looking as possible. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and I feel like there's there's this whole underpinning of order versus chaos, right? And kind of the push and pull there, and not only in terms of what's going on with the grid versus being crumpled, but even some of the color choices kind of push against one another, right?
Yeah, and that's something I've started to really explore with some of the most recent works, is that I find myself, I even tried not to do it, but I can't help myself but having pink and orange together in paintings. That's happening all the time now, and I love how they play off of each other and give the works this optically this kind of radiating effect sometimes. And it's definitely something I'm very actively pursuing. And even now though, I go so I'm going back and forth where I like putting these really jarring colors next to each other in the paintings, but then I'm also going the opposite direction and having I like every once in a while just do these kind of black on black paintings, and either just going back and forth between a glossy and a matte, or just kind of subtly kind of altering the appearance of it, and going so it's I'm going between two extremes, and sometimes I put them together in individual works.
Sure. Well, this one I'm looking at here, the large black one, it certainly has sort of an op art sort of feel to it. I mean, there seems to be some resonance going on with all the waves, right? And the different wave patterns going on, and then when you add color in there, it there's certainly a feeling that kind of radiates off of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, so these the most recent works at the moment they're flat paintings, which when I first started doing them, it was like, oh, this is weird. Can I make a flat painting? Is this okay? It's of course it's okay, right? But and I still have these conversations with myself, but
sure.
Yeah, so they're so now I'm playing more with kind of optical effects, and so they're all drawn out on the computer. So I'm really my work has has transitioned to being produced on the computer using Adobe Illustrator to kind of plan these things out. And anyway, so I'm drawing them out in the computer, and so all the lines and the waves do come from my hand essentially, but using a stylus. And then
so how does it get transferred from the computer on there? Are you projecting, or are you printing? Or?
I have I make stencils essentially. I make vinyl stencils.
Well, it goes back to your obsession with the Xacto knife.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like it's very much. I just got really was very neurotic to go and cut out these drawings. I got more particular about how I want these paintings to be as razor sharp as possible, and that really have as minimal signs of being produced by hand as possible. So yeah, I make these vinyl stencils, and of course it's all the finished painting is always just acrylic on canvas. The vinyl is not in the finished work at all, but I use that for the masking, and that allows me to get the paint on there and just as crisp as I can, and build it up in layers. So each color is its own is done in an individual layer, and I'm playing though with. Of course, when I have the crumpled paintings, the imagery as I produce it, and that also is produced helping me using a computer to make the grids and other forms. That work is I'm always conscious of it being flat in terms of the grid. Whereas now with the flat works, I'm playing with these kind of looping kind of waves and other marks that, when put together, they create the illusion now of the dimensionality.
Right. And so the those vinyl stencils do. So are you're able to paint right onto the do you need to do any masking, or not masking fluid, but I know some folks that work with acrylic that really clean lines, they'll use a clear acrylic medium. So that things are really clear, clean. The lines are really clean.
Right.
Do you need to do that with this, or is the vinyl so clean that?
No. Yeah. So so the vinyl, again, you go through this process called weeding it, and then and so that determines what is masked off and then what is open and what's masked and what's open, and do all that and put it on the canvas. And then I absolutely do I do layers of matte medium, usually matte medium, which generally speaking that'll seal the edges before I go and paint on top of it. And either I'll use matte medium or I'll use whatever color is laying under it.
Right. You'll
paint a couple coats of that, and that will seal it, and then that allows me to get the very sharp edge that I want. And then and again though part of it, because it is I guess I can only make myself as mechanical as possible, or as allows, where there are still little hiccups in the paintings, in areas where there'll be little bleeds or little drips or something will happen. And it used to, I guess it still does kind of drive me crazy, and I find these things, but I'm actually I'm slowly allowing myself to embrace those a little bit more, and having little pockets either on the corner, on an edge, just in a little spot where it does hint to the process of making it, or that it is in fact, rendered by me, and they aren't completely perfect in there. Though I don't know, a person might walk up to them and not see that at all, but all I see are the flaws in them.
Well, the thing is, you're probably, there's a lot of square footage going on in a piece that size, and I imagine you would probably be more attuned to spotting the one part that indicates the artist's hand versus someone that's coming up to it, randomly, right?
Yeah.
So some of these, like the piece I'm looking at on the far right, where it's the orange and the pink, which you were talking about, and how they really play off one another. it looks like that there's some collage going